welcome to Growing Native Plants in the Front Range. This is a small acreage. Sorry about that. Had a little technical difficulty. I'll start over again. Welcome to Growing Native Plants in the Front Range. This is a small acreage webinar program supported by the Natural Resources Conservation Service and the Colorado State University Extension. My name is Jennifer Cook. I'm the Small Acreage Management Coordinator for the Front Range. And today with me I have Crystal Strauss, who's the Natural Area Program Botanist for the City of Fort Collins. Crystal is also a native plant master with Colorado State University Extension and the president of the Colorado Native Plant Society. So before we get started, I'd like to orient you to the left-hand corner of your screen. If you're new to webinars, this is the chat box, a place where we can communicate with each other. So during the presentation, you can type in questions or comments and hit enter, and that's a way that we can communicate with each other. So the format of our presentation today is I'll turn it over to Crystal for about a half an hour presentation, and then we'll take a few 5 or 10 minutes for question and answer. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Crystal Strauss.
Hi, thanks Jennifer, appreciate it. Welcome everybody, I'm glad you're all here. I have a huge list of participants, I'm glad to see all of you here. Today I'm going to be talking about how planting native plants on your property can save you time and money. Let's see. Let's say that you are thinking about maybe planting some wildflowers on your property, and you really don't know much about it, but you think, hey, well, I'll just go to the store and maybe pick up some wildflower seeds. So you see some wildflower seeds, and okay, I'm going to need to move this. And say you see these packages, and you're thinking, oh, they say wildflowers on them. There can't be anything wrong with that. They must be good for my property. So I'll go ahead and buy them and put them on my property and see what happens. So let's say you put those out there on your property, and you get some of the flowers germinating, and there's some really good growth, and you're pretty happy with it. And then about maybe a year later, you get a notice from the Larimer County weed folks saying that you have a noxious weed on your property and you need to take care of it. This is a surprise to you because the same plant that they're talking about is a plant that you actually bought in that seed package in the store. Thing is now that's going to cost you time and money because you've planted a noxious weed, and according to Colorado state law, you now have to take care of that plant and either eradicate it or control it. So what I'm here today to tell you is it's really important for you guys to be knowledgeable about the plants that you plant on your property. And I'm going to give you some plants that I think are really good for you to look at and maybe plant, especially for the northeastern Colorado. Sorry I can't cover the whole state of Colorado, but I'll make an offer a little later for all of you folks that are in other parts of the state to try and help you out. Here's an outline of the presentation I'm going to give today. And to start off with, the book that you see, Weeds of the West, is an awesome book. If you guys get a chance to pick one up, I would definitely pick it up. This is a book that has a lot of really great photographs of weeds, and weeds is a broad term, and I'll cover that a little bit later. But if you have livestock or if you have horses on your property, this book will also tell you what's poisonous and toxic to horses and livestock. So it's a really great book. I'm going to talk about 4 different types of plants and the reasons for planting natives. I'm going to cover 10 native plants that I think are awesome and I would definitely recommend for you to put on your property. And then I'm going to talk about how to plant native seeds. Okay, so 4 types of plants. I consider there to be 4 types of plants. Just from the presentations that I've always given, there's always some confusion as to what's native, what's exotic, what is a weed, and what is a noxious weed. So I'm going to give you some definitions for those. First of all, native versus exotic. This is the description for a native plant. plant species that occurs naturally in a particular region, state, ecosystem, and habitat without direct or indirect actions of humans. Another description that I like to use is a plant that occurred here prior to European settlement, and that's what I consider to be native. So either one of those definitions will work. So if that's native, then of course the opposite has to be exotic. Plant that occurred here following European establishment would be an exotic plant. Okay, native plants are pretty darn important. They're usually diverse because they have things here that control their numbers and don't allow them to spread and become a problem. So usually when you see a native landscape, it's kind of like a patchwork. There's a whole bunch of different plants all together, and it just kind of fits together. And usually you can spot a weed right away. They just don't fit in the landscape. They just don't look right. They're usually big and robust, real showy. And native plants are really important because they provide habitat for specific animals. Take the short-horned lizard that you see there in the picture, and when you have exotic plants, they tend to take up all of the soil room. And if you notice that short-horned lizard, he has really short legs. And so if there's a plant everywhere growing, he really can't get around very well. Notice he's sitting in an area that's kind of wide open and easy for him to maneuver around. Those native plants provide that for him. Now, native plants also provide nectar sources and food sources for butterflies and moths. And the Front Range of Colorado is actually pretty well known for having a huge diversity of butterflies and moths. So providing those types of plants for the animals in your property will draw them there. Okay, and weeds. Weeds is a very broad term. A weed is a plant, and I like this definition the best, and this is from Weeds of the West. A plant that interferes with management objectives for a given area of land at a given point in time. Now notice it doesn't mention anything about whether it's native or whether it's exotic. A weed is really a definition for you. It's whatever you find is kind of a problem in your garden. For instance, the bindweed, the big white flower that you see up there in the corner, it has a big problem in my yard there, the green arrow, you can see it pointing there. Now, in my yard, this plant is a big pain, bindweed, and I'm sure that a lot of you have problems with this weed too. So I really don't like it, but it's also considered to be an exotic plant. Now, there are some other plants too that are commercially available. Take this one, for instance, St. John's wort. Now, St. John's wort you can buy it in drugstores because it's used medicinally. And this actually is a noxious weed in our state. But there's other plants too that, say the native iris, it's native, but a cow can't eat it. So it's toxic to a cow, so it would be a weed to somebody who had livestock. Now let's talk about noxious weeds. Now, if you're a small acreage landowner, you probably are pretty darn familiar with noxious weeds. Noxious weeds are non-native. They're highly aggressive and competitive, and the reason that they're so successful is because they don't have any of the systems that keep them in check in their native lands, usually Europe and Asia. They don't have any of those checks that keep their populations low, like it with our native populations. They don't have the predators and the diseases here that they do in their homeland, and so they can just run amok. Now, according to Colorado state law, a noxious weed is a term, and according to Colorado state law, if you have these plants on your property, you're required by the law to either control or eradicate them. If you guys would like more information on noxious weeds, Colorado Weed Management Association offers some really great information. And their website's right down there. Here's the Colorado State Noxious Weed List for you to look at. Notice it's broken up into 3 lists. List A is plants that don't occur very often or in big populations in the state of Colorado, and we have the opportunity to eradicate them. And if they do happen to occur on our land, by law, we are required to eradicate them. List B and List C are more common plants, and we will never get rid of these particular plants because their populations are so vast. But we are required to control these populations. Okay, so I have a lot of people who talk to me about, well, Crystal, I really don't like planting natives. I really don't want to plant natives. And these are some of the reasons that they tell me that they don't want to plant natives. They say that exotics have more varieties. Granted, I'll give you that. There are a lot more horticultural varieties. Exotic plants really have the market on that. But I'll tell you what, natives are starting to really come into the market, and they're starting to be a lot more prevalent, which is really great for those of us who love native plants. People also tell me that exotics are cheaper. Well, maybe. I think that if you can buy natives in seed, I think you can find some of those just as cheap as you can exotics. So really, you just kind of got to go shopping for it. Easier to find. Granted, again, there are more varieties of exotics, but natives again are really starting to come into stores so that you can start purchasing them. Even in some of the local nurseries around here, Bath Nursery, Fort Collins Nursery, Gully's Nursery, and I've even seen some natives over at Home Depot. So you can find natives out and about. You just gotta know what you're looking for. They also say, Crystal, exotics are easier to establish. And I find yes or no, really depending on the plant that you buy. Natives are supposed to be here. They are adapted to our climate. They're adapted to our soils. So there's not a lot of work to putting in natives, whereas some of the horticultural plants are a little bit harder to establish. A lot of people don't know much about native plants, and that's why I'm here, and there's a lot of people out there who are talking native plants these days. So if you get a chance to see any presentations on native plants, I definitely recommend that you go do that. And also the Colorado Native Plant Society really offers a great website for you to learn about those too. I've had people tell me that native plants look weedy. This one bothers me because look at that. Look at that. These are all native plants that are available commercially. I have bought most of them from seed companies around here. I've taken all of these pictures, local nurseries, and I don't think they look weedy at all. As a matter of fact, I think they're absolutely gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. Let me go back to this here. You know, this is a picture of the Russian olive right here. And who knew? Who knew that when we started planting these pretty heavily in the 1970s that this plant was going to end up on the Noxious Weed list? And now it's costing Coloradoans millions of dollars to remove this plant because it is now on the Colorado Noxious Weed list. And it's not a native plant. It's from Europe and Asia, and it did really well in windrows here. It worked really well. It grew fast. Problem is that the seeds really like wetter conditions and started moving down towards the rivers and the streams and started to really populate along those areas and removed the native habitat of cottonwoods and willows. Who knew? Aren't they beautiful? All right. So how are native plants going to save me time and money, Crystal? All right. So how much is your time worth? If you buy exotic plants, a lot of times you're going to have to be watering a lot, and you're going to have to be watering every year. Native plants are acclimated to this particular climate that we have. And sure, there are some drought-tolerant plants out there that are exotic that don't require a lot of watering too. But the chances of it turning out like the Russian olive, if it's exotic, there's a chance that it might turn out on the noxious weed list. So go ahead and plant native. And a lot of our natives are drought tolerant, and there are some natives too that require a little bit more water. But you're not going to, after you get these established, you're not going to have to worry about watering all the time. Fertilizing, forget it. Our native plants don't need it. They're acclimated to these soils. Soil amendments, you don't need it. Not with these plants. Noxious weed control. And again, you start planting something exotic, you never know what's going to happen. I was kind of interested in how you all use your land. And so I'm going to pop up this question here real quick. And as I'm going along, if you guys would let me know how you use your land, I would appreciate it. And there's 4 choices there for you. Great. So the money. Watering, it takes money. If you want to set up an irrigation systems can be pretty expensive, especially if you're talking small acreages. Fertilizing that's a lot of money too. Adding soil amendments and getting the gear out there in order to mix those soil amendments in. Noxious weed control. This picture that you see over here. This picture is what happened to somebody's lawn when they put Roundup on the bindweed, trying to kill the bindweed. So there's a lot of intricacies to using herbicides and spraying weeds. And this person didn't read the label and didn't see that it would also kill his grass. And can you imagine using this and losing a whole bunch of plants that you had really wanted in the ground, and now you have to start all over? That gets really expensive, especially when you're talking about lawns. Now, talking about lawns too, maintenance. Having to mow these areas, there's a couple plants that I'm going to talk about a little bit later that don't need mowing. You can use them as a lawn. They're wonderful. They're drought tolerant, and they stay short. There's a lot of maintenance with exotic plants. And if you guys have a garden, then you probably know that. And a vegetable garden and a fruit garden are totally different than anything else that I'm talking about today. I'm talking more of your wide-scale use of your land. Once you get exotic plants moving in and kind of running amok, again, because there's no controls for their populations, no pests and no diseases, you start to get monocultures. And what a monoculture is it's one plant across the landscape. And when you do that, you get a loss of wildlife. If you're buying these beautiful large pieces of property so that you can see some wildlife, you can see some different birds and deer and things like that, you're going to lose those if you start planting exotic plants. And don't forget this too. It's not just what you plant on your property, and it doesn't just affect you. Those things, plants have moved from people's property into agricultural lands. There's so many problems with jointed goat grass, for instance, that came in as a seed contaminant and is now moved into crops, and it costs farmers millions of dollars just to control this plant. Did you know that your land value could drop depending on what kind of plants that you have on your property? I read a study the other day that said that your land values could drop up to 10% depending on what type of noxious weeds you have on your property. And you would hate for something like that to happen, especially if you went to the wildflower place or bought your wildflower packets and you were the one that planted them there and they ended up being a noxious weed. They also affect recreation. Remember the Russian olive that I talked to you about? Can you imagine going next to the river and trying to go fly fishing and running into this nasty thorn? I mean, those are nasty. And if you've ever been in Canada thistle or knapweed populations, they are just horrible, absolutely horrible. It's really hard to get through those. Imagine what it does for wildlife too. So if it affects all three of these things, agriculture, land values, and recreation, of course it's going to affect the economy of Colorado. So it's a lot of responsibility, I realize that, but you guys are getting in on the beginning here and learn about native plants and learn what you should plant. That's good. Okay, so if you're wondering why I keep harping on not buying exotic plants, this is why. This is from the Colorado Noxious Weed list. These are the plants on our Colorado Noxious Weed list that were introduced as ornamentals. Things that people bought at nurseries or in seed packets, they didn't know that these things were going to turn into nightmares. This is nearly 40% of the Colorado Noxious Weed list, so that's a lot of plants. And if people had only planted natives, maybe we wouldn't have this big of a problem. Granted, some of these plants are absolutely gorgeous. Take, let's see, Dame's Rocket, Hesperus matrinalis. If you drive up the Poudre River Canyon, you will see lavender in June. And the whole hillside is just covered in lavender, and it's because of this plant. It displaces other native plants. It makes it not as hospitable for wildlife. Granted, it's pretty, but for me, I think I'd rather see a mixture of plants. I'd rather see the wildlife. And I'd also really not rather deal with the cost of noxious weeds. So actually, one more thing about the ornamentals. If you go online, you can buy any of these plants on this list. You can buy any of them. And they wouldn't tell you that they're a noxious weed in Colorado or they're a noxious weed maybe in Wyoming. They wouldn't tell you that information. They're interested in selling these plants to you. So it's your responsibility as a consumer to find out what is noxious in your state and what you don't want to plant and what you do want to plant. So I just saw a new housing development here in Loveland about 2 or 3 years ago that had purple loosestrife completely planted in every single yard in that new housing development. And that's actually on our A list. If you see right here, purple loosestrife. It's on our A list, and it was planted in every single yard. So you can get these plants. So it's your responsibility to know what you should plant and what you shouldn't plant. How do you guys use your land? So what did we come up with? Other. Oh, okay, we're going to have to go. Idle dryland grazing in yard. Very nice. I figured there would be a little bit more grazing, but I'd like to see that the wildlife and natural. Okay, so if you guys want some resources, I'm not going to go in to tell you how to plant specific plants, but if you would like some information, these links are awesome. You can go to any of them and get specifics on how to plant stuff. Okay, so here's some reasons for planting native species. Save you time and money. Native plant will never, ever, ever be a noxious weed, so you don't have to worry about it. They compete with exotics. They provide excellent erosion control. They improve land values. It helps in agriculture because they don't move into agricultural fields. Improves the wildlife diversity on your property. The diversity of your plants. They're adapted to the soils and climates. They're cheap to buy and they're easy to find. It doesn't hurt the recreation. It's going to improve it. So if you're going to have more wildlife, then It's nicer to recreate on your piece of property. It also helps the economy. Okay, so 10 native plants to plant in Northeast Colorado. And I got the 10-minute signal, so I'm going to go through these real quick. But all of these plants are native to Northeast Colorado, and actually they're probably native throughout Colorado, but I am specifying on Northeast Colorado. And as you move further east, let me just tell you that your seed mix would definitely change. And if you guys are interested in knowing what kind of plants you should plant on your property that would be native, if you would like to, you can just come and email me. I'm on that past resources page. Just look at that. I'm down at the bottom. Give my email address there. If you want to email me, I'll get you in touch with the people who can tell you. Okay. Buffalo grass, great plant, great grass. This is the one I was telling you about for the sod. I'm not going to go through all of this information here. This webinar is being recorded, so you guys can come back and look at this anytime you want. And I've provided a lot of information in those little boxes that will help you out. This is an extremely drought-resistant plant, no fertilization, soil amendments, and really with the rest of the plants that I'm telling you about today, you really don't need those either. This is a sod former, and you can buy this as a sod from some sod companies. I think it establishes a little bit better by seed myself, but you can try it either way. Blue grama is another great grass. I have had this as a sod in my yard before, and I loved it. I thought it was a really nice grass. It was very nice and soft. And also, did y'all know this is our Colorado state grass? Very easy to establish. Also, all the plants that I am giving you today too are considered to be non-toxic to wildlife, livestock, and to horses. But just remember what Paracelsus says, it's not the poison, it's the dose, because every plant can be poisonous. It just depends on the dose. So all of these are okay to plant in your area if you have horses or livestock. Okay, western wheatgrass. This is a great grass. It has a beautiful blue-green color. I wouldn't use it as a sod, but I think it's a really great part of the pasture. Canada wild rye. I think this is probably one of my favorite grasses just because of the seed head. I mean, look how beautiful that is. It's a gorgeous grass. It might need a little bit more water, but this, in the restorations that I've done for the city of Fort Collins, has been one of the easiest to establish. It's a short-lived plant, so you'll definitely want to plant it along with some other grasses like the blue grama and the buffalo grass, just so that you can have something there after this one dies out. The Plains Cottonwood. This is my favorite tree, and I want you all bring attention to this right here, especially since you all are interested in, well, a lot of you are interested in wildlife and have that as part of your use for your property. Plains Cottonwood stands provide habitat for 82% of all bird species breeding in northeastern Colorado. That's huge, and this plant is. It's a phenomenal plant. I would not plant it next to your house or other structures because it does have weak wood and it is shallowly rooted. So, but it'll provide nice shade, and also I think that if you had this on your piece of property, I think it would improve your land value. It does need more moisture though, and if you plant it in a dry area, just know that you're probably going to have to maintain it because it does need a little bit more moisture. Four-winged saltbush. This is a really great plant, and I think it's one of the most understated and under-talked about plants out there. It is extremely drought tolerant. It can get established in some of the nastiest soils. It's wonderful, and I've also been told that it's an ice cream plant for livestock, that they really go after it. They really like it a lot. And also the wildlife really like it a lot. So much so that you may need to protect them from wildlife and livestock if they're getting browsed down too far. Mexican hats. Now we're getting into the forbs, some of the beautiful plant species that I love so much here on the eastern slope. Mexican hat is one of those, and this plant will self-seed. So the original plant will come back every year. It's a perennial, but I have this popping up all over my yard and all over the garden area that's been planted over at Nick's Natural Area for our Colorado Native Plant Garden. And it pops up everywhere, and it's just a delight to see anytime you do see it. It comes in the yellow that you see here, and also the red. Cudleaf sagewort is another plant. I just like the silvery color of this plant, and it's a good food source for several different types of wildlife, and it kind of just breaks things up. It's a good plant to plant. Purple prairie clover, this is a delight to see. I love this plant every time I see it. It is in the pea family, so one of its benefits is it's a nitrogen fixer for soils, and it's great for erosion control. And it establishes really fast, and usually you can have flowers blooming from seed by the second year. Blazing star is another one of my favorites. This is a late summer bloomer. Absolutely beautiful, and if you want to take pictures of butterflies and moths, this is the plant that you want to plant in your yard, because it's actually a food source and a nectar source for several different types of butterflies and moths. Great plant. Okay, so planting native seeds. So all the plants that I talked to you about, except for the cottonwood, are listed in this table here. And I've made a mock seed mix for you. So if you wanted to go to the seed company and say, hey, I would really like to plant this, this is what it would look like. This is for 1 acre, and if you notice, this PLS right here, oops, move that up just a little bit, means pure live seed. And what that means is, this is how I order all my seed, is pure live seed, is when they gather a whole bunch of seed, not all the seed will germinate. So they have germination tests on these seeds. And pure live seed means that I'm getting 3.1 pounds of pure live seed. It's not just 3.1 pounds of bulk seed, which has some seeds in there that just won't germinate. It's pure live seed. So when you're ordering, that's something that you want to look into. I've also put in some tips here for how you should plant native seeds. Do not bury native seeds, because they need to have sunlight in order to germinate. So they just need good soil contact, and you're good to go. Here's some of my favorite places to buy native seed across Colorado. And that's how native plants save you time and money.
Okay, thanks, Crystal. I guess right now we'll take some time to do question and answer. We had one question while you were talking, what is a forb? If you want to go ahead and just answer that real quick. It looks like Rachel kind of already took charge of answering it, but if you want to go into any more detail, you can go ahead. And also, I'm going to put up a survey, so while we're doing the question and answer, just so we can get some more information about how you enjoyed the presentation today.
That's a really great question. A forb, there's several different growth forms of plants. You have grasses, which are considered to be monocots, and then you have other plants that are considered dicots. You have shrubs. The big ones with grass, forb, shrub, and vine, it just gives you a description on what type of plant you're planting. Now for a forb dies back to the ground every year, so it doesn't have woody stems. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's a really good explanation of forbs. Let's see, and then we had a question about whether the presentation will be available, and yes, that's a very good point. The presentation is going to be recorded, or has been recorded, and we're going to put it up on the Small Acreage website, so you can link to it from there, and I'll send out a link to everybody who's registered for this webinar. So if you rewatch the presentation, you'll be able to click on all of the resource links that Crystal had listed, and it'll take you directly to the website. So that'll be pretty useful for all of you. So hopefully you'll be able to look back and really use her lists of seedings and different plants to help you grow things on your property. So let's see, do we have any more questions? Ruth, can you move the survey a little bit? There you go, that's good. Oh, we have a lot of questions. So do we have some ideas for alkali soils? What can you plant on maybe say real quick, alkali soils are high in lime.
They're high in salt concentrations, and usually they're in areas that water comes to the surface and evaporates and leaves all of the nutrients. So that's why they're called alkali areas. And yes, there are several different native grasses that are out there that are excellent for that. Inland saltgrass. Several of the sand drop seeds are very good for alkali soils. And I think that was from Mike. Mike, if you would like to email me, I would be happy to email you back a list of some really great alkali species for you.
Great. Let's see. How are Colorado nurseries banned from, or is it frowned upon for them to sell noxious weed seeds?
It is actually illegal for them to do so. And I believe that there is one gentleman for the entire state of Colorado that goes through the Home Depots, the nurseries, and looks for those plants. And I believe that they are fined if they are selling those. So, but when you get a nursery that's selling plants across state lines that's a noxious weed, it might not be a noxious weed there. It's not frowned upon there. I'm not sure exactly what they would do about that.
Okay, and then we had a little comment from Nancy as an aside. Kansas Native Plant Society is worth getting on their email list. Okay, thanks, Nancy. Okay.
What is the suggested evergreen for windbreak? Boy, I'd have to look into that for you. I am not good with evergreens. But if you want to email me, I will get back to you and let you know what some good plants are. It also depends on your elevation, so I do need a little bit more information about your property, where you're at, whether you're on the west slope or the east slope, and your elevation. So if you can give me that information, that would be helpful.
And you could also email me. I'm the Jennifer Cook that you emailed to register. I also can give you some information on planting natives and a windbreak.
Megan,
oh, we need to put up our email again. Ruth, could you type our emails in there, please?
Yeah. Do you want me just to type them in there?
Yeah. So Ruth is behind the scenes our IT help, and so she's going to type in both of our emails. Do you have both of them?
It's CS.
Let me get. And it's what?
CS nativeplants@gmail.com.
So do we have any other questions?
Nope.
All right. And Megan mentioned the Rocky Mountain juniper, which is a great plant to do for a windbreak.
Yep.
So thanks, Megan. So if we don't have any more questions, I guess this will complete our webinar for the day. So just a reminder, the next two webinars in this webinar series are, the next one is February 10th, Septic Systems and Well Basics. So you don't want to miss that one if you have a septic system on your property. And then March 10th is Common Forage Grasses. So hopefully we'll see you for those, and you can email me to register for them if you haven't already. So thanks for joining us, and I'll see you next time.